Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Work Nation 2021. Welcome back to season 2 with your fabulous co-hosts, Nomad and Norm. Welcome, Nomad. Welcome.
Thank you for the kind introduction.
It's been a minute. I mean, it hasn't been a minute between you and I, but obviously it's been a
Oh,
minute.
there hasn't, literally, there has not been anything.
But it's been a while for us since we've actually done a recording and spoken to our listeners. So we've missed you guys, by the way. So we hope everybody has been doing well, particularly after this pandemic, and hope everybody's. Oh, geez, I hope everybody's alive, right? um, but yeah. Anything else you wanted to add, Norbert?
No, I just hope everybody's doing well. It's been some time. Like the last podcast we did was sometime in 2019.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day.
Yeah, back in the, I know. Well before when the world, when we were allowed, the world was a different place. But anyway.
So even though we like the podcast carries the same name, Rock Nation, and it's produced by the same people, we're still going to bring out slightly different, I think, content and mindset to this podcast, or because I know at the very least for me, like in the year between 2018 2019, I was still like a young fresh person who became ex-Muslim. So very much to me, even though it was intentional, it was a podcast that was trying to convince people and trying to promote activism and things in that similar vein. And the podcast is not going to be going to be focused on those things. It's going to be a different podcast. It's just going to be more
personal. I love that, by the way. I love your description of that. Like, exactly. Like, I think when we first came out initially, and to be fair to us, it
like
was really different time.
I hadn't even done for a whole year before. Like it was, I think it was 4 months. I've been
Oh, wow.
Exmuslim, and then we began organizing, making the podcast. So I was like fresh.
Yeah, I guess you were, but it really just speaks to what an incredible human being you are, Nubbard, honestly, that, you were able to quickly make that turnaround, to be an apostate and then to come out publicly within a matter of months, like it just, yeah, I mean, you certainly got big balls. Not that I would know about that, but anyway.
Okay, let's
Okay,
go.
I gotta stop being inappropriate. So without further ado, I was going to actually, I wanted to piggyback off of what you were just saying. When Work Nation, our first iteration of Work Nation, we'll call it season 1. It was much more about. I gotta be honest, there was a lot more anger and resentment in me. It was I feel like. Well, for me, anyways, Rock Nation Part 1 was a lot more of a protest, particularly because I felt as though I was being bullied and harassed and targeted by diaspora Somalis simply because I was an atheist and apostate, and I felt like I was being ganged up on. You know what I mean? Like, from because it was like I was getting DMs from UK Somalis, Minnesota-based Somalis, Canadian Somalis. Thank you, UN, for spreading these people around. But anyway, I digress. Literally, I was getting, death threats, rape threats, and they were really vulgar messages. I had Somali girls sending me DMs begging me to kill myself. So for me, honestly, when I started doing Black Nation, my motivation was like, one, obviously, I would not lie down and bow down to any bully. And two, I actually wanted to, I wanted my voice to be heard. I felt so offended, and that, what to me were refugee Somalis that had been given the ultimate opportunity to come to the West, to the liberal West, and create a life for themselves, were, using violence against another Somali. It was surreal. I honest to God personally believe that, Somali migrants should be humble, and so the idea that they were, policing what a fellow Somali was doing in Australia, I found really abhorrent. So anyway, that was the source of my anger then. So, but anyways, We will move along though. I think, yeah. So I was just saying, like, that was the crux of the reason why we started Bark Nation Part One. We were being silenced, bullied, harassed by rather
And also,
shameless individuals. Um,
and also, it wasn't just that we were being silenced and bullied. From my perspective, it's just there was nobody else, right? Like I was
right,
looking for the content that we were making Recognition. I was looking for the other types of, specifically Somali ex-Muslims who had these experiences, who could talk and who I could relate to. And at that time, I don't even think there was like, I think it was the same time where, what was his name? Apostate Prophet,
yeah.
and
We
Abdullah
want to
Samir.
shout out to
They
those
also,
creators.
they also came out at the same time. So I was just a part of that wave of people who was trying to create content for people that could, Somalis who could relate to it, queer Somali people that of course relate to it. Because we have like dual representation here.
Right, right.
Both as being ex-Muslim, being queer, and you being, a liberated woman.
One of a kind, but yes. Um, so look, yeah, no, exactly that. Shout out to the apostate prophets and all the other ex-Muslim content creators, that were coming up with content specifically because yeah, we wanted to see ourselves, and I just want to say there was ex-Muslim content for me. There's no the pinnacle of ex-Muslim content is the book Nomad, you know really. I mean, it's the Bible for ex-Muslims, like, in my opinion. That along with and that along with the Old Testament infidel.
Mhm.
I feel like Nomad is like Nomad. Yeah, it's just such. If you have not read it, to our listeners, these are Ayan Hirsi's. I honestly got read all Ayan Hirsi's books. I have read all of them. Heretic, all of them are incredible. Even the Caged Virgin. Yeah, like Ayan Hirsi, honestly, for me is like our Prophet Muhammad in this regard. Like, she really wrote the blueprint for Somali ex-Muslims. And I know there's a lot of people that, are cringing and critical of Ayan. And just to say, write your own goddamn books and let's see what you come out with. First things first. No, seriously, I always want to say this to Ayan critics, because I'm just like, when you fight a million jihadis, have your best friend murdered, write a few best time sellers, New York best time sellers, we will appreciate your opinion. But until such a date, I don't hear you, So that's my requirement for anybody that's critical of Ayan. Like, do a fraction of the work that she has done in my opinion, she's done that for us. Like, um, she paved the way. So yeah, I've just got a lot of respect for her. So, and Ayan also is like, she's of a different generation, and just in Somali culture, like, Ayan was born in 1969. That's the same year as my mum and stuff like that. So it's a respect thing. I'm not stepping on Ayan's toes. I don't publicly criticize Ilhan, and I'm not the biggest fan of hers. So, and that's a respect thing. But I'm really digressing on this. No, but where are we? Where are we now?
Before we dive into where we're now, let's give our listeners, some context. This episode is going to be like where we're now, how do we identify, and just our current state as, creators and
Right,
human beings.
right.
So,
Yeah.
so clearly there's been some time between 2019 and now. So, obviously there's been the pandemic, which has been difficult for everybody to get through. It's made people reorient their life. To me, also, as a part of my journey, it's also been I created Rock Nation very early on in my ex-Muslim process, so I hadn't really fully digested the whole experience and how I had to reorient my life after it. So once we paused, the podcast, most of the time for me just went with recalibrating, my life, like negotiating again which kind of people would be in my life, what kind of direction do I want, to go into with my life, and finding meaning and purpose too. Because there is definitely a period when once you become ex-Muslim, you sort of feel like you've lost purpose, and you
Mm-hmm.
sort of have to find purpose, and that requires a lot of energy and mental thought, which to me also distracted me from making the podcast. And also, a part of me also felt that I'm like, even though we didn't put out a lot of episodes, part of me felt like I've done my part, right? Like I was expecting somebody else, a group of other people to come forward and be like, yes, we're doing our own recognition, we're gonna make
Right.
the same similar content, and we're gonna be fun. I was like, yes, thank you, take over, because I was still trying to manage this new existence.
Are you talking about the other ex-Muslims that were trying to like spitefully, demotivate us from doing the content, but they never ended up doing anything?
I'm just well, those people too. But in general, I just expected like once we kept going that there will be other people who contact us and say, hey, we want to take over, and I'll be like, fine. It didn't have to necessarily be the Walk Nation podcast. They could call it something else.
Right,
People
right,
who were doing the same thing in our vein,
right.
and they never came. And to me, I felt at some point it's like I have done enough content within Walk Nation. I've covered the issues that I wanted to cover, and now I had to move on. To clarify what kind of life I want to live afterwards. Because again, I was very new with the whole ex-Muslim thing, so it didn't come from a place of trying to talk back to people who've been harassing me. Because I don't know, nobody really bothered to harass me. And that's probably part of it's male privilege. Part of it is also like people they don't get a lot out of harassing me because I don't respond to them in any kind of sense. And also, I'm somewhat of a secluded person, so there's really only just a small group of people.
And to be fair, you're a man. No, I think it comes down to you're a man. Let's be really honest here. Nobody really in Islam. Islam is all about controlling women's sexualities, and so honestly, to be honest, the Ummah's not as offended by you as they are by me. Somali people just don't care about you in the same way, or they don't care about policing your behavior in the same way they care about policing mine, and other females like me. So. I just want to say this to clarify, because there's going to be a lot of Somali guys around here and like, oh, I don't experience that. No, you don't experience it because of your gender, or your sex, or whatever you want to call it nowadays. You don't experience it because you are the patriarchy. You are the patriarchy that is, that's the crux of it. Like, nobody's going to address a grown man about what he does. The only thing that could offend Muslims or the Somali community or whatever is your LGBTness. That's when, and why does that offend them? Because that's rooted in you acting like a woman. That's in their homophobia. That's what they see it as. So again, it goes back to the hatred of women again. So there's that.
So that was my little snippet about why I haven't done the podcast, and so people can be asking why we're back, and I think we just we've gone through. I think
to be honest, we were never finished. Like, honestly, like, I don't really have much else to add. I was never finished. I had a lot more to add to WAC Nation, but there was a lot of logistical, and it's also just so difficult to talk about these type of topics. You know what I mean? And it's really taboo. Like, there's a reason why CNN and or like mainstream media avoids this topic like the plague. Doesn't matter how many terror attacks have occurred and how many people die, they will sweep it under the rug, because such is this subject is just so inflammatory. It brings up so many emotions and so many reactions out of people. So it is difficult, to maintain energy to want to discuss these, Yeah.
So that was a little tidbit about where we are now, and also part of where we are now is also how do we identify? Because I think even though we use the ex-Muslim label a lot, and it ties into a lot of what we do at the podcast and the experiences we have, I think we both come to terms with the fact that we don't really identify as ex-Muslims anymore. In private settings, not just in private, but also like in anything that is not specifically calls for us identifying as ex-Muslim, right? Like when you talk with people in real life, I'm not going to address them to say that I'm ex-Muslim. First of all, they don't.
I don't use that label. Firstly, let's talk about the label for a second, the ex-Muslim label, because this is where a lot of people get this on this hill. This is a cyber term, right? That is literally been created, in that sort of Twitter ether space and stuff like that. We know there's a whole bunch of organizations with the name, and it's absolutely valid, right? That being said, it's, the majority of Muslims are not on Twitter, but apostasy is not anything new. Actually, the first apostate wars did not start on Twitter. They started after the Prophet died. So actually, this is an ongoing. If you understand Islamic history, if you really know your Islamic history well enough, you will know that this has been an ongoing issue, actually since the dawn of inception of Islam. So, but yeah, people misconstrue and they think, oh, for example, I had somebody tell me the other day that. Actually, I'll go into this story later. But anyway, go ahead, Nomad.
So yeah, I think it's just like, and I think it's part of the growth that also happened between when we did the podcast early on and now where we are now. Because the first revolution, the mental revolution, is to give up the label of being Muslim, right? And becoming ex-Muslim.
Yeah.
But the problem that you begin to over-identify with it, with being ex-Muslim, right? And that can carry with it a lot of negative assets, right? Like you become resentful of Islam, you become resentful of the Muslim community. You have a tendency to get into theological discussions, even though nobody called for you.
Yeah, exactly. You're your own. You're gal ulama. You know what I mean? You're the gal ulama going around.
Exactly. You go into the most inflammatory discussions, whatever. Like you use your time like reading up, hadith quotes and Quran quotes and be like, hey, so, and then trying to disprove whatever somebody in your life said. And I used a lot of time discussing about slavery and specifically the issue of slavery because it's one of the easiest issues to bring up.
Yes,
and people
I love
people, because it's an issue where there's but there's a misunderstanding of history, right? That, like a lot of Muslims been told something like they've been told essentially that Islam came and it was slowly outfacing slavery when that wasn't true. So you can bring up
it started slavery, it began slavery, it owned slavery. No, I love to remind Muslims that you're telling you. I will use my last breath to let these people know that they are absolutely responsible for chattel slavery, the transatlantic. We will never forget Africans, never forget.
Yeah, we'll never forget, but it's not something I, go into whenever I'm with a Muslim. I used to use a lot of energy from that. Like it takes a lot of mental energy to be in a state of opposition to Islam, which is what happens when you like over-identify with the ex-Muslim label. So to me, the second revolution is not giving up, but just shedding the ex-Muslim label and just becoming a person, not defining yourself in opposition to like 1.6 billion people, and instead just becoming your own person. And also, like, there's also the issue, like, what does the label mean? Because it's not just the cyber. I would disagree. It's not just it is a term that is created in cyberspace, but it's also a term that other people understand in real life, right? Like,
no, but I'm telling you, some people don't. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, even say, for example, in the older generation. Actually, the first person to ever put in my head that Islam was fake was a Somali man. You know what I mean? And he was an older, our parents' age, he was, and we were having a big chat about it and stuff like that. Now looking back in hindsight, he was definitely, obviously, an ex-Muslim, but he wouldn't know that label. You know what I mean? Like I know him, I've seen him around. Like actually, hopefully, one time when I'm in that area, I might say hello. But I want to ask him for what he thinks of the label. But. Yeah, I was going to say, I've had a lot of chats with so-called Muslims, right? And when I tell them about the ex-Muslim label, they're like, oh, yeah. They're like, hey, yo, Noon, yeah, I'm the same thing as you. Whatever. Like, I don't know what that label is. It's new, but yeah, count me in. So it tells me that they don't know about it. It's a cyber thing,
It is very much a type of thing. And one of the reasons I say, like, not shying away, but just making sure that I define myself rather than being defined as a label. But at the newer generation know of ex-Muslims, and I don't mean they know them like in an intimate sense. Like they don't know like the leaders or like even the arguments, but they know of something called apostates, Muslim apostates. And so. And I was doing this course like for the last 6 months, where I was commuting with a bunch of Gen Z Halimas or Gen Z Somali women. And I don't know how, but at some point we were talking about, one of them inferred that I was Muslim, saying, oh, we were doing this thing for, I can't remember what it was, but she inferred that I was Muslim. And so I just looked at her in the eye and said, no, I don't believe. I didn't even say that I was Muslim, just, I don't believe in this. Mm-hmm. And this woman looked at me like I said that came from a different species of human beings that has never been recorded in history before. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, I think. But one of the things like she said to me later after I came out, I was like, "Well, you're different from the other types of apostates, right? Like you don't hate religion."
اللي يعوش واحد يعوش يعوش
and I just looked at her and said, "Well, it's not that I don't hate it. It's just I don't use my energy making my life about disliking it and arguing against it. Because in some ways they were like eventually, even though it was a shock to them, that I was a Muslim. Eventually, they came to respect it. Because I was my own person. I wasn't defined by
right.
a whole movement. Like they don't know the movement, but they know the worst aspects of it, the excesses of it. So when you over-identify with a label, you become representative of these excesses.
Right.
So and it's both tasking at a organization level, right? Because as an organization, you don't want to be tied into like the rapid and just ravenous ex-Muslims on Twitter who say like the nastiest things. Even things like it's not as if we're like sensitive, like we blaspheme all day long.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes just the thing that they say, it just makes you cringe. Go like you didn't have to go there.
Yeah, like I disagree with them like antagonizing like individual like Muslims. Here's my thing. Like the reason why I don't, this is the crux of the reason why I refuse to argue with any Muslim, any modern Muslim. This is why people are like, don't you want to talk to Sheikh? No, the Sheikh is irrelevant. The ulama is irrelevant to me anyway. The way I see it is the person I would like to speak to is Prophet Muhammad himself. Because I want to figure out, I want to know, why did you do this? Why did you say this? Like, and I don't need to hear, like, I see Muslims as victims of Islam. Therefore, that's why I disagree with ex-Muslims that can't go out of their way and they'll, antagonize an individual. This person is a victim. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he is programmed to believe that this is the truth of the world. And yeah, he will harm you for it because he sees this as a direct, attack on himself. Like, he doesn't separate himself from Islam and the Prophet. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they have no separate identity. Honestly, God, I empathize fully with Muslims. Unless a Muslim attacks me, I don't care. I'm also an atheist to the 7,000 other religions on earth. Like, I'm not being saved by Christ or anything, so.
And going off what you just said, that you view Muslims as victims of their own ideology, and not just ideology, but they were also if we're being blunt, we were brainwashed, right? Like every one of us would we're not only told that Islam was the truth and that what we had was the truth. It's like there was no other truth. It wasn't a truth. It was the truth.
Yes.
So when you said that you see them as a victim, I think that's also a sign of being involved, like and that's also part of the whole growth you do. Not everybody, but if you do,
like I empathize. I empathize with them. They don't have to be me. And another thing I just want to say about ex-Muslim, just to say, there's not something else. Ex-Muslims on Twitter and stuff, you'll see that not only are they coming for innocent Muslims, they're coming for everybody who believes in religion. And this is what I really disagree with, because I see ex-Muslims like bickering with Hindus and Christians, and like I'm like, Jesus, like I'm like, Mahakuke, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God, sometimes I can't speak. Sometimes I wish everybody could speak Somali with me. But like as in, like I wonder with these ex-Muslims, I'm like, but why do you care, babes? Like we just dealt with jihadis that wanted to behead us. I mean, if we're not being beheaded, let's chill. Like, why do we have to piss off the Jews and the Hindus and everybody else?
But even the fact that you can empathize is something. If I have to be honest, in the beginning there was definitely a lot of anger and resentment, just for a lifetime of being lied to and everything that came with it. All the things that you were told you couldn't do, and the way people treated you. And we'll talk more about that in another episode about Somali upbringing in diaspora. But a lot of that just leaves you with a sense of resentment. And it's only when you begin dissecting these things and fully digesting your experience that you can come to a place of empathy. Which is also why I think when you said that your empathy with them also shows that you've moved away from this more rapid phase, this more, angsty, angry phase of being ex-Muslim, which is also where you over-identify with it.
Right. And
because you can be an ex-Muslim, but you can also not identify as one, right? Like
that's true.
go out of your way to say to people that you are one. Also, and I don't know. In general, it's also just not only is it not only is there like a a logical theological reason for being it, right? You don't want to be associated with these people, but also just a practical reason. Like people don't care. Like like Muslims, like the type of people who care, the type of people
nobody cares. That's why I want to tell these Exmuslims. Nobody cares about Byron. Sorry.
And the type of people who care, you don't want to be around them.
Exactly. The thing is, the type of people that will pull out the violins for you and pull out the whole orchestra for your little story are not the people that you want. You know what I mean? Like, I just, set my people free. I don't know what to say about, like, I wish ex-Muslims, the best. But I think, going back to what you were saying, do you want to say a bit about the resolution?
I mean, again, like for me, my first resolution was, finding out that Islam was, wasn't true. My second resolution was, and this was also something I was doing like the whole period where we were after the podcast, which is just like reorienting my life, being like, okay, so now I don't believe in this. Like, what am I supposed to do? What does my future look like? So some of my resolution was, exiting, saying goodbye to a lot of people that I grew up with because I now disagree with their values, and I saw the trajectory that they were on. Right, they were becoming more religious. They wanted me to participate in all these religious traditions. I was like, I don't do that. I also had to like another resolution point was I had to, what do you call it? I had to find out like how we should relate to your family, because at the end of the day, and it's so funny because and we always say this as a joke, but it's so true. Like Ayan Hirsi, the greatest atheist Somali atheist on the face of the planet, still has a relationship to her mother. She still calls her mother like once in a while. So if Ayan Hirsi can't escape her family, there is no hope for the rest of us. So with that in mind, I always had, and I knew that before. Like I even found out that she was still talking to her family. But that also just underlines that you also have to come to a resolution with your own family. And so for me, the relationship that I now have with my family is more professional, because there is a recognition that there is a bridge between us because I don't longer believe, and I'm okay with that. Like I've built emotional boundaries, so like I don't get emotionally manipulated and pressured into things that I don't agree with. So that is like one of the many resolutions that I had to make, and I made it both when we were doing the podcast and also after. Which is also why I can look at this with more bird-eyes perspective, having empathy for Muslims, and also knowing like there's more to life than just raging against a community. And also, there's also more important thing to your identity than being ex-Muslim.
Or like identifying with what you with what you're not. You know what I mean? Like that's really unhealthy. Like I identify with the things I love, not with the things I hate, So and that's the thing. That's the reason why I don't use ex-Muslim. To be fair, I don't use the ex-Muslim label because I don't want to be associated with ever being a Muslim to begin with. I want people to assume, it's so ironic, but my auntie, one of my most religious aunties used to say when I was young, she's like, oh, you have to learn Somali because, when I was learning Somali as a kid, like it was like torture as well too. That was, they would like ignore you if you spoke English, those kind of tactics, So one of my aunties used to always say, you're going to be one of these, do you want to be black? Just black? She's like, do you just want to be a black Australian? And I honest to God, like I would be looking at my auntie and she'd be like, don't you want to be like, unique and like, something like as in, that's why you should learn the Somali language. And I'm like, good point. And I to be honest with you, I'm kind of with her in that regard. I like knowing my culture, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I am a black Australian. You know what I mean? And I freaking love that. And when she was saying that to me, it was like kind of crazy to me because I'm like, what else would I be, auntie? You know what I mean? Regardless. But her idea was being Muslim, I guess, trumped every identity, which, I mean, to me, I never really saw it that way. I think one of the blessings I had of being born in the West was I could see the irrationality of my people. Like, I always knew, I'm just like, this is really weird. Like, we're worshipping, Allah can only communicate with us in this foreign language that we all have to learn, but it's not our language. Okay. But Allah and Allah...
That always used to puzzle me.
Even as a child, how I could work out this equation. I'm like, what? That kind of so dumb. I'm like, but we're black. we are black and these people are telling us we're inferior and we have to learn their goddamn language in order to communicate with this God that is supposed to be for everybody. I swear to God, as a 5-year-old, I was like, this is why they were beating me so much. You know what I mean? I'm telling you, I feel sorry for my younger self because I really believe I was beaten for the truth. Like, they beat the truth out of me. They try to make me a liar by, you know, because they try to make me regurgitate those Islamic lies. Like, this is a peaceful, you know, it's a cult. You know, you're regurgitating, you regurgitate lines. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even know, like, they're not even original. It's like, you say things like, oh my God, I can't even think off the top of my head now, but you say things like, oh, I love the Prophet. I don't know, just freaking, it's, yeah. Anyway, RTS. Back to the matter at hand. What is the crux of why these ex-Muslims can't find a resolution? So we believe the reason why a lot of these ex-Muslims, and particularly, you know, we've suffered from this ourselves too. We believe a major hindrance in coming to that resolution and that, you know, end point in their journey. A lot of these ex-Muslims are stunted because of RTS. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I didn't even know what RTS was, but the minute I read, you know, the symptoms of them, I just was, you know, shocked because it describes, you know, a lot of the process of being, like it describes the process, describes the state of being. Luckily for me, it, you know, I don't like. I can understand symptoms in a past tense now. I can say instead of, you know, being like I'm not actively in the state that RTS describes now, but I can see myself being there in the past when I first became ex-Muslim. Not just becoming ex-Muslim, but also like the whole doubt process. When you slowly, you know, lose your sense of
before you actually bite the bullet and actually say I'm ex-Muslim, I'm an apostate.
Exactly, because it begins prior to the conclusion. Once you have the conclusion, I think it just intensifies this. But yeah, before we delve too much into it, would you like read up the symptoms?
Yes.
I just described shortly what RTS.
Okay. So this is just to be clear, RTS, so religious trauma syndrome, is not yet in the DSM-5, but these are the symptoms as experts have described them. Confusing thoughts and reduced ability to think critically. Negative beliefs about self, others, and the world. Trouble making decisions. Feelings of depression, anxiety, grief, anger, lethargy. A sense of loss, directionless, and being directionless and being alone. A lack of pleasure or interest in things you used to enjoy. A loss of community, family, friends, romantic relationships. Feeling isolated or the sense that you don't belong. Feeling behind the times with cultural happenings. Oh, this is so good. Feeling behind the times with cultural happenings. And many other symptoms of PTSD, including nightmares, flashbacks, disassociation, emotional difficulty. I just want to piggyback on that feeling behind the times with cultural happenings. I think that this is going to be a major issue for a lot of ex-Muslims that I'm talking about diaspora ex-Muslims, feeling behind, let me just say it again, feeling behind the times with cultural happenings. We grow up in sheltered, in like completely sheltered, suffocated environments. I now have neighbors actually that live near my house, right? They're Afghans. Bless their hearts, lovely, interesting, you know, group of people. But, you know, the family there, I find it so I'm not going to lie, I'm disturbed by the kids' upbringing because there's like literally 10 children there. And it reminds me exactly of my relatives. You know, I spent like a year living with one of my aunties. And it was horrible like this. It was like a military camp. You're never allowed. These Afghan kids, they have no friends. You know, their friends are their siblings. You know, they can only play in their gardens or in their front yards, which is really sad, you know. Like I see the way they're dressed, you know, they're kind of dressed in these hand-me-downs. Like they're not, you know, there's one girl, she's like 18. I feel sorry for her. Like I always kind of say hello and stuff. But, you know, she's like 18, you know, I feel she would want to be stylish and wear makeup and stuff, but she's got these two aggressive jihadi looking brothers that would beat the living daylights out of her. And I've heard beatings, you know, and all kinds of, anyways, an Islamic upbringing is, to say sheltered is like an understatement. You know, it's so strict. It's so strict. You know, you don't have friends. You don't understand dating. You know, I'm not going to lie. I did not understand dating, you know, what it was like to be a normal couple, you know, how to be. There's so many things that I did not understand from a Western perspective. And I'm not going to lie, I still struggle with it. You know, I still struggle because I've been stunted and I've been, you know, ask me about, you know, 5th century Arabic. I can answer those questions, you know, and how to pronounce something in some ancient language. I got you. But ask me about, you know, very basic, I don't know, you know, coming of age experiences. Like there are huge gaps of my life that are missing. And that is because of, you know, you're not allowed to associate with the kuffar. You're not allowed to fraternize with them. They're the enemy, you know? And then
especially the fraternizing part.
Yeah.
I find to be, you know, one of the most stunning part of it, right? Because, like, I don't know, if you grew up in a Muslim, especially in a household with it, and I'm not talking about the more liberal households where there's a laissez-faire attitude, right? I'm talking about like the regular, the strict regular Somali, you know, household. Like you're not allowed to, you know, fraternize with them. Yes, you can be, you know, friends within school, but you're not allowed to go to their houses. You're not allowed to, you know, go with them to birthdays. There's a lot of, you know, so there's like a lot of coming age experiences that I just didn't have, and there's a lot of socialization that happens, especially early, like, you know, late adolescence until your teen years that I didn't have with the quote unquote kuffar. So this not being allowed to fraternize with them is actually one of the most, I think, one of the most stunting parts of growing up in a religious household.
And also having guilt for fraternizing with them. I don't know if you ever felt guilt. I felt a lot of, I was so programmed, and it just goes to show you, you know, when you're told from a young age that these people are destined for hellfire, if you're associated with these people, your soul is also going to hellfire. I used to feel guilty because I used to like my Australian friends from different various multicultural backgrounds, you know. I really liked them and I really thought they were great people and I really enjoyed their company, but I had this conflicting, you know, belief that these people were taking me to hell, you know. These people, they were going to hell and they were taking me with them, you know. It really, it's so damaging. And I think that also contributes to what happens to when ex-Muslims leave Islam and they feel this anger, you know what I mean? Like, because people say, oh, you know, move on with your life and stuff like that. Oh, so it's cool. So now after all the, our childhood, things have been, like our whole lives have been robbed from us, you know what I mean? And now we're being told you just got to move on. I think that frustrates a lot of ex-Muslims, and they just become like borderline evil towards the ummah. You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh, right, okay, so you want to tell us to just move on after you beat us, you know, treated us this way, gave us this, you know, false opinion of life. You know, people are like, okay, well, we're going to make your life difficult too. You know what I mean? That's why I think that's where the motivation comes from. And I also do empathize even with those unevolved ex-Muslims that do feel that's necessary process. And in a way, I do feel like the ummah kind of does deserve it. You know what I mean? Because they do treat their kids poorly. You know what I mean? I think there was a quote once that said, I can't remember, I need to find it, but, you know, it was some great, you know, let me just leave it for another episode because honestly, we're running out of time. And I want us to get onto the last point of individualism in a Somali or a tribal context. From coming from this background, what does individualism look like? Individualism, like when you come from, you know, a culture where every facet of your life, down to quite literally how you use the toilet, is being policed, and you're being told and taught how to do everything. You know, personalities become archetypal. You know, nobody's an individual. So then it becomes a challenge of once you leave the tribe, what it looks like to live on your own, like what it means to have your own values, opinions, and also, you know, you've got to really create. I was going to say your own culture, but it's probably a bit of a stretch. But anyway, I think we're going to actually end on that note, and because, you know, I'm foreshadowing the next episode, which we're hoping to do on our dysfunctional diaspora Somali upbringings. So we hope you guys join us for that episode. And I think I will expand a lot more on this idea of individualism and archetypal personalities that develop, the type of archetypal personalities that develop in this extremely stifled. So yeah, join us next week. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Join us next time for a discussion on our Somali upbringing. We hope you enjoyed our insights. Thank you so much. Bye bye.